And now, live from the studios of Freedom's Phoenix, Ernest Hancock.
Welcome back to Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock, each and every day here from the beautiful studios of Freedoms with an S, freedomsphoenix.com here in Phoenix, Arizona. Man, let's get right to it. Now, the author of Rocketeers I have on, Michael Before, and he's also the author of just being released in paperback, The Department of Mad Scientists, How DARPA is Remaking Our World from the Internet to Artificial Limbs. Yeah, they're remaking it all right. We'll talk about that. We'll have you back on that another day. But today, what I want to talk about the future. The future. Now, the thing is that rocket technology that we're using even now, 50 years later, is essentially hasn't changed. It's the same. We're still doing Model T stuff, are we not?
That's right. Yeah, and that's why it's really a fallacy that most of the mainstream still believes that only a big government program can get us into space, into low Earth orbit and beyond. We've grown up with this idea that it's got to be NASA or some massive government program, but in fact, the technology's been around for decades. And one of the Rocketeers put it to me this way: it's as though right now we're trying to build automobiles, but we have no infrastructure. So every shop that wants to build a car has to go out and machine their own, their own wheels, manufacture their own tires, their own spark plugs, somehow create their own wiring, do all that stuff without the benefit of an industry and infrastructure to source things from. And in fact, that's exactly what SpaceX is doing. This is the company that's currently in the lead for sending astronauts into orbit, and private company. They've just moved everything in-house. They're doing what Ford did early on in the beginning. It's just creating everything under one roof and driving the cost down. So once that kind of activity becomes more common, then it's just economies of scale and an infrastructure out there that supports space travel, and then suddenly it's just going to be just like the airline industry or trucking or anything like that.
Well, now that brings us to, we have up on the graphic now, the Rocket Racing League. And tell us about that and why they wanted to do that to kind of spur this innovation. Talk about the Rocket Racing League.
The Rocket Racing League is another brainchild of Peter Diamandis, who created the X Prize that Burt Rutan Scaled Composites won back in 2004, with the first privately funded space shot with a person on it. And he's getting at just what I'm talking about. He's saying, okay, now we've proven, we've removed the giggle factor, as they used to call it. It's no longer considered laughable that a private company or a small team of people without a massive amount of taxpayer money can actually go to space. Now let's work on making it affordable to the rest of us. Let's try to create that infrastructure so that each shop doesn't have to create its own one-off vehicle at enormous cost. So the Rocket Racing League is an attempt to do this by creating a NASCAR-style league with rocket-powered airplanes and with competing teams from all across the U.S. and perhaps beyond that would start to create demand for these kinds of components that I'm talking about: rocket engines, pumps, these kinds of things that can then be sourced by other companies to do more than just racing with rocket-powered airplanes.
Yeah, so you can go to Napa Space Parts and just order what you want to get and make in your garage.
That's right. Yeah, and we were talking before the break too about how the propulsion system for Spaceship One got started, and this is a good example of what I'm talking about. Burt Rutan built airplanes with scaled composites. He had figured out how to build a space plane, but his company never got into the propulsion business. They were like Boeing, they'd create the airframe and do all that stuff and then go source the engine somewhere else. And he went out trying to find this infrastructure. He figured, well, it's got to be out there. Got to be able to just find some rocket engine, off the shelf somewhere, and he couldn't. And what he ended up doing was finding this guy, Tim Pickens, who was building rocket engines in his garage, and he really liked his technology, his hybrid rocket technology, where you have a solid fuel propellant that's fueled, gets oxygen from nitrous oxide. So it's this hybrid approach where you got liquid nitrous oxide and a solid fuel. And he had this rocket-powered bicycle, actually used roofing tar. And I love that story because
you add oxygen to anything that'll burn, and it burns fast.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of that system is if you shut off that oxygen supply, the whole system shuts off immediately. So it's got a built-in safety where Tim would have his hand clamped on the flow switch for the nitrous, and if he got bumped off or if anything happened, all he had to do was release that switch, and the machine would stop running. Burt Rutan really liked that because he had just seen a demonstration of a liquid-powered rocket engine, pure liquid, which is more traditional, that just exploded. And he didn't like that idea at all. So he decided to go with the hybrid approach. He brought Tim out to Mojave to be the first manager on the propulsion side of things. And that's still the same kind of propulsion they're using for their second-generation vehicle.
Let me go ahead and describe this for the audience so they kind of get an idea what we're talking about. Because it was, I tell you a little bit of history, Michael. This is where I came. We're up near the break, so I'll take a couple of minutes to kind of give you my perspective on this. It was the summer of 1998, I think it was. I was in Washington, D.C. for a wedding of my brother-in-law, and I brought my 4 children. We had to go to the Air and Space Museum. So let them just run around, whatever, and I waited at the entrance exit there, the big glass wall, and in between the doors where nobody would see it was this little monument that described the Anasari X Prize. No government money, to space, back, do it again, 2 weeks, only 10% of the weight of the craft minus the fuel be changed, boom, done. I go, oh, here we go, because I understood what that was too. It's a Lindbergh thing. When I heard that Burt Rutan it was the summer of 03, I think, when it was announced that he was getting involved in this thing and had Paul Allen's money, I go, I don't even know if I knew about Paul Allen then, but I knew Burt Rutan. I've been following him since I graduated high school in 79, following all his designs on all the science magazines and so on. I'm like, oh, yeah, baby, we're going. Well, what happened was he came up with the idea to fuel it. The rocket motor was, for people, just so you kind of get an understanding, imagine a soda can that's just solid rubber. Now, there's a hole, like you just take a straw and you put it right down the length in the center of the soda can, and at the end of it, you got an liquid oxygen that would feed through that hole, and at the end on the other side is the rocket nozzle. When you ignite with the oxygen and the rubber hit together, or your tar or whatever, with propapola, whatever, some hydrocarbon something, it's a solid. So what happens is it burns, and it burns fast. And you can throttle how much oxygen that you're allowing to go to the rocket nozzle. And if you shut off the oxygen, it shuts off. You turn on the oxygen, you can reignite it, turn it on, turn it off. To have a throttleable rocket engine in a solid form, a hybrid like that, man, that was simple, simple, simple. And I'm going, yeah, baby, that's the key. Because all you have to do is refuel the liquid oxygen tank, you keep that on the spacecraft, and put another plug of rubber in there, and you're ready to go again. If they had to, I'll bet you they could do it the same day. Oh, you see where we're going? You guys stay right there. We got a lot more stuff to talk about. Space stations. 2 of them in orbit, private, no government funding, right, not later. Right now, over your head, right now. Never heard about it, did you?